The topic of this morning's talk is in the form of a question. I like questions. So if no one else asks me a question, I'll ask myself. This one actually was written, we have a place in the kitchen where there's a little dry erase board where people can suggest topics for our talks, which I think I did that last week, didn't I? So this one is, the question is, why do we need a teacher? And I'm putting it, say, do we even need a teacher? Which is a much better way to look at it, I think. So we're practicing meditation. If you're not practicing meditation, then it's probably important to think about that. But if you're trying to work with some kind of an awareness practice, then to do that on your own without a teacher or teaching, I don't know, that might be okay. You should try it for a couple of years, see how that works. You'll probably find yourself either stopping altogether or coming to some kind of maybe various dead ends, like that's not working, and then instead of stopping altogether, going what a Trungpa Rinpoche called a spiritual supermarket, going from one thing to let's try yoga, that's not working. Now I'm going to try. What do we mean by not working? From the point of view of this teaching, it would probably mean probably, it would mean that your ego is not happy. Your self-centeredness, your belief in a self is not happy with the results of whatever practice you're doing. So that would cause you to do what? More merry-go-round. Trying to find the right seat on that merry-go-round, most comfortable seat. The one that should have eyes open, eyes closed. This mudra. What? Should we even have a mudra? Should we do a mantra? Should we? What? Those kind of questions. So I would say you shouldn't have a teacher unless you have to. If you don't have to, don't bother with it. Go do something else. Live your life. Live. See what it's like to just live out of your karma. To be born into a particular family, a particular relationship with your family, your mother, your father, your brothers, sisters, your environment. Go ahead and see how that's working. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I'm saying actually look and see, is this working okay? Can I just live my life, whatever, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever it may be, and just do this, get a degree in botany, teach at the university, try to get along with people, maybe get married, maybe not, and try to live in what we call the 8 worldly dharmas that has a construct like success and failure, praise and blame, any polarity. You can use any one of the polarities. Life and death is another polarity. Pain and pleasure is another polarity. We're always grasping one, rejecting the other, and those polarities are called polarities for a reason. You know how everything happens for a reason. Yeah. Well, this is one of them. And it's because the one can't be that kind of a dynamic or that concept without its opposite. Anytime you grasp anything, you create an opposite. It just manifests because of the very nature of creating things. But I could tell you that, and you could say, yeah, I kind of see that. But unless it hits you right in your midsection, in the middle of your, teaching, in the middle of your life, wherever you're at in your life, unless it really hits you, you'll probably just continue to function out of the causes and conditions we call karma. Cause and effect, relative situation. Not wrong, but not free. And maybe freedom isn't important to you. And if this is going to go on forever, if you could live forever, then why meditate? After about 300 or 400 years, you'd finally stop torturing yourself. You'd finally stop worrying. You'd finally just relax. Enjoy yourself. Be nice to people. Be nice to yourself. Kind. If you are practicing an awareness practice where you are endeavoring to take this awareness that sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, thinks, all this awareness, if you're endeavoring to get this awareness to see what is true, not just somebody's opinion that you can believe in. I'm glad that's over with. Now I got somebody I can just believe this. Well, I'm an atheist. Well, I'm agnostic. What do you think about what I'm thinking about what you're thinking? Well, I don't know. Have you really looked into agnosticism? Well, I looked into it for a while, and then I thought, well, it's just a concept, and yak, on and on and on. I'm not saying that, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just talking in this way to see if you can recognize any of this in yourself, how we're always trying to find what's right, what's wrong, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. It's a constant looking for evidence, looking for proof. And the kind of relative situation we find ourselves in, you will find some proof. But as I have said before, and we'll say again, all evidence for anything is partial. You never can see the whole evidence for anything, not to mention the absolute, but in relative truth, you can only find part of it, a little bit of it, maybe a lot of it, maybe enough to write a book. So when it comes down to a situation where you may have decided to enter on the path of awareness, possibly a study of Buddhism, that's what it's about, awareness. The very word Buddha comes from the Sanskrit word, I think it's pronounced Bud, which means awakened or to awaken. And what did he awaken to? He awoke to the truth of dependent origination, or nothing is separate from anything else. The last thought you had 3 seconds ago is intimately connected to everything else that's arising. Intimately. The one you're having now is too. But if you don't see that, then it's just a concept. You think, well, yeah, I can see where that would be. Think more about it. I think that would be true. But to understand that deep in your heart, to understand that deep in your consciousness, will change your whole life. Maybe not outwardly. Maybe you might still be a plumber. Maybe you might still be going to school. Might still be doing any number of things. But to see that really, it makes for a radical. And radical, what do I mean by radical? Radical comes from the word radix, or root. A root, down at the root, the basis. It's just a way of talking about things, not to be insulting to the plants or the trees. But right down at the basis of that, we begin to have a transformation of our consciousness, our awareness. The question, do you need a teacher, comes from the idea of, might be a good idea if you're going to try to study something, learn something, to talk to someone who's done this for a while, something you may have just started 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago for that matter. Talk to somebody who's been doing this a while. And I'm not saying somebody that's been doing this for 3 or 4 years isn't very, very clear and clever and smart and everything. They might have even had a realization. But you need to stare at the tree. You need to look at the realization so that you see what it is. It's nothing separate from what happened 15 minutes before you had the realization. If you think it is, then we're right back to plus and minus, plus and minus. I used to be this, now I'm this. So the teaching person, if he or she is on your wavelength and also has realized who they are and what this is, this doesn't mean that they don't have bad habits. This doesn't mean that they don't say things or do things that to you may seem not in line with your idea of what an enlightened being would be. but it means that they would do everything very, very straightforwardly and without a second thought. Might even be without any thought at all. Probably not. Thoughts tend to do whatever they want to do anyway. Have you noticed that? You can't really stop your thoughts. You can't control your thoughts. If you could control your thoughts, you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere controlling your thoughts. You'd be somewhere being happy 24/7. And so the idea with a teacher, this person, if you're practicing meditation, this person would be able to work with you where you're at. And in some traditions, especially in the Tibetan tradition, you have to completely trust that teacher. You don't get to question them anymore. No matter what they do, you don't get to ask them about anything. Of course, this is coming out of medieval culture in Tibet. So they probably had to do that kind of thing. In these times, we don't go quite that far. But what I would say is, if I'm functioning as your teacher, or anybody who's functioning as your teacher, give them the benefit of the doubt at least. Don't have to trust them. Turn all of your bank accounts over to them. Do whatever they say. March into battle. Whatever. But it's a very good idea to give them the benefit of the doubt. Be very careful about accusing them of anything. I'm not saying, don't be ridiculous. So I'm not saying don't. If they murder somebody, say, well, my teacher did it, so it must be okay. My teacher was my first teacher was from some people's point of view, was quite a scoundrel. You read about Trungpa Rinpoche, has a really bad reputation in some areas, except for the people that studied under him. Because he was very outlandish in so many ways. On the other hand, whatever he was, I would not be here if it weren't for him. And I can say there's probably literally thousands of people could say the same thing. But if they were here, they wouldn't have the kind of understanding that they do about their lives. Yes?
Is there a way that we can relate to our teacher more directly as opposed to out of our ideas about our teacher?
Probably the best thing I can say is don't second guess. Not that the teaching person is probably trying to work with you mutually where you're at. Why wouldn't they? They would try to see where you're at, and as I talk about it, try to meet you where you're at, where you're functioning at. So therefore they can have a conversation with you about something. But if you've asked someone to function as your teacher, you're in for it. Your ego is in for it. So I would say don't do it unless you have to. Keep on living your life somewhere else. I'm not talking about somebody who at a yoga studio who just teaches meditation where you sit half an hour 4 times a week. I'm not talking about that. That's a different situation altogether. I'm talking about a situation where Buddhism is actually transforming your life so that when you head towards your death, there's no fear. You actually know what's going to happen to you. Sir?
Could a thing be a teacher as opposed to a person? Not to get abstract.
No, that's all right. Give me an example. That's a good question. Give me a thing.
Yeah, sure.
Like what?
Like a river.
Huh?
Like a river, say.
A river?
Yeah, like.
The issue with in nature, being in nature, watching the leaves fall, and like some people even say, I just meditate in nature. I mean, if I sit in a place like this and look at a wall, I'm miserable. I don't like it, or it's boring, or it don't seem to getting anywhere. Whereas a river is soothing. When you meditate watching a river, very soothing, very comfortable. It's a kind of motion that we like. The motion of a mind we don't want to watch. So what do? We go and we mix that with the motion of a river. This is much better. Well, so Jim, how is your meditation going? Oh, it's going great now that I sit and watch the river. I feel so much better. Meditation is not about feeling good. If you think that meditation is about feeling good, feeling pure, feeling clear, feeling, then I'm not saying that's wrong. If that's what you want to do, then do that. So you could do that, but if you want to transcend this world, if you want to actually, for it to be not a mundane path, but a spiritual path, if you want to see what your life is really about, I mean, you didn't ask to come here, at least that you don't remember it. We have amnesia about that. We did do a lot of things before we were born, but we have amnesia. If you sit and watch a river, it might be the very thing you need to do for a while, depending on how much banging around is going on in your heart and your mind. So that may be the best thing you can do. It's like I would say to some people who come to me, even though my general teaching is about keep your eyes open, just watch what continues to move. Some people I might have them follow their breath, count their breath. Some people I might have them doing mantras or something else that is a little bit more workable, allows them to work with the mind while not being exactly entertained, which is what a river would do, would entertain you. So, and I wouldn't say that you couldn't watch a river and actually learn a lot. There would be a certain kind of learning probably would take place, but it would be the chemistry of your karma along with the chemistry of that kind of situation. It would be different for each person. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Michael?
You often refer to your teacher and Tibetan Buddhism, and yet this temple is Sokuzan. Aren't those two different traditions?
They are different traditions.
And I'm just wondering why is this a Sokuzan temple rather than a Tibetan Buddhism temple?
It's both.
It's both. Okay.
Yeah, it just doesn't look like it.
Oh.
But it will. If I have anything to say about it. And right now I have quite a bit to say about it. But I'm not dead yet. So I'm still doing things. So I'm saying it's just tradition. It's a matter of having a form that will contain your awareness so you can train your awareness. Because if you don't have a form, if you're just watching a river, don't misunderstand. I'm not poo-pooing watching rivers. I think it's great to watch a river, watch the leaves fall, walk in the woods. It's a wonderful feeling to be around nature. It's just like it's wonderful to be around animals because they're so present. Being around a dog is just, they're happy. They like you, no matter what you do, pretty much, unless it's a Jack Russell Terrier, in case you better be doing what they say or what they think that they're saying when they bark. So it's just a matter of forms. There are people doing tantric practices. White Tara is a tantric practice that I teach. And then there's other, at some point there will be a Tibetan shrine room in the top floor of this building. It's not been constructed yet, but you're getting onto that, right? That will occur. It just takes time. And then I'm not sure how that will develop. I don't plan much. And the other thing I'd like to say is the coming out of centuries and centuries in different countries where everything is kind of coming together. And if you look anywhere you look about meditation practice or Buddhism, they're all overlapping in different ways. There's so many teachers and teachings and so many ways of doing this these days. Just in the last 10 or 20 years, it's been just amazing to watch this compared to what it was when I started a long time ago. Michael?
Aren't there just different traditions even in Tibet?
Yeah, there's 4 main traditions, and there's the 4 great and the 8 lesser schools of the Kagyu lineage. It's the Kagyu lineage of Om, which is one of the major lineages, of which there's 4. Some people say 5, if you include the Kadampa sect, which is actually part of it. Just goes on and on and on. And then if you go down and study that, the history of it is so complicated. You don't have time to study Buddhism. You're too busy studying all the politics and what His Holiness the Dalai Lama thinks about Dorje Shugden, and then there's the advocates of want to practice Dorje Shugden. I mean, it's just, and then there's layers and layers and layers of issues and problems and so on. And then somewhere in there's a whole bunch of people practicing meditation, and they're devoted to that. But without that form, even it looks some political sometimes, just like Roman Catholicism or any religious form. There's always going to be a form where some people become very fundamentalist and attached to the form, and then other people understand that the form is a support for them to have their mind become free, not to become chained to a form. And sometimes you might need to go back to the original question. You might need a teaching person to help you see that. It's, people are chained by forms. The people who practice the forms aren't chained by them. Yes.
So what's the relationship between the form and the ego?
The ego is a form. It's a false form. When I say it's false, all forms are false. They're constructs. But it's one that thinks that the consciousness thinks is real, thinks there's a self. The traditional way of saying it is the seventh consciousness points at the eighth consciousness and says, "There's me up there." That's where all this stuff comes from, so that must be me. But yet the seventh consciousness is the one that acts as the gatekeeper. So more forms, more ways, more structures and ways. This seems to be pretty complicated. Shoka.
How can someone relate to the response that a teacher gives when they ask the teacher a question?
They should listen to it. Is that what you're asking?
It seems like sometimes if you respond, there's a quality of thinking that it should be something different.
But that means you listen to it. You actually listen. And then what did you do besides that? Added to it, yeah. So don't add. It might be difficult to hear a response and then to not jump to a conclusion about it. Well, that must mean, or I wasn't asking that, or something else. And to, kind of in your own mind, correct the teacher. You shouldn't even be correcting yourself. So that's why the teacher is here. So the teacher can function as an exteriorization of your ego. I'm not talking about psychology here. I'm not talking about transference. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm saying that the teaching person, without even knowing it, they might not even be conscious of it, but when they're with you, they function as you. I know I experienced it with both of my teachers. Very tricky. You follow me?
Not with the exteriorization.
So you're here and you have your own whatever's happening to you, and the teacher is functioning with you, but at some point, because they don't see any separation between themselves and you, they sometimes will actually mirror back because they're like you. So they mirror back what they see happening here. It just becomes a mirror because they're no longer picking and choosing. They no longer have a self to defend or promote. So therefore, they're just with you. And if you start to feel chaotic, they start to feel chaotic. You follow me? I like that smile. Way to the back. What was your name, sir?
Zach.
Zach, that's right.
Just curious, in your opinion on whether or not there's a distinct sort of individual quality to each person, or
Yes.
is there more of an absence there?
No, I would call the absence could be there, but I call it discontinuous. It's easier to work with it that way. One of the ways you can see that is notice how your moods change. That's your, if you're a solid being, you just feel the same all the time. Good. But since we're completely at the mercy of things that are coming and going, our identity is coming and going. But instead of seeing that and saying, hey, there isn't anyone here. There isn't. This doesn't mean you won't suffer on some level or have difficulty. But that understanding that there's no solid person here to defend that's the beginning of it. That's pretty liberating. Identity is discontinuous. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of what
Okay.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, just reflect on that for a couple of years.
Yeah. Or more.
Yeah, or more. You could actually take that, you could sit down on the cushion, look at the wall for an hour or so, and then the last 10 minutes of that hour, you could actually write that down. Identity is discontinuous, and then see if you can see the way in which it's discontinuous. And then when you do that, see if you can see what it is that sees that it's discontinuous, and see if that's discontinuous. You follow me?
Yeah.
You do this with awareness. You don't do it with thinking.
No.
Yeah, you don't do it with, if you think about it, then you might as well get up and go find a legal pad, get your computer out,
Right.
and play chess. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sheldon.
It seems like I have a really strong idea that I can do this myself.
What in the hell are you doing here then? You think you can do this yourself?
Because I found that that's not true.
Oh, okay, good. Thought I'd lost my cameraman.
The question is there a way that the teacher can help us see that we need direction rather than trying to find our own direction?
You know, it's even though it's, you know, it's so mutual and it has to do with your karma and their karma. So if the teacher is back, the teacher doesn't sit back and calculate how they're going to interact with you. So therefore it's spontaneous. And it's so spontaneous that can be frightening. But the teacher can't help but function the way he does or she does. And so it could show up so many different ways. Usually it's within a situation where no matter how difficult that situation may be, even by being snubbed by the teacher, which has happened to me, it still converts into teaching rather than that's a bad teacher. Why were they rude to me? You know, why did they treat me that way? I've had people, because of my actions, just walk out of here. And I could say, if I was a really self-centered teacher, which I'm not, I could say they're lost. They missed their big chance to study with the master. But what has actually happened is it is a very, very sensitive, very touchy area. It is very difficult to be compassionate for someone and feel deeply how they feel, resonate with their feelings, and still be direct enough with them to know that however you function with them is going to be seen as a teaching rather than as some kind of an intrusion on your life or your privacy or something. It's difficult to do that. So, you know, since you've asked the question, in your situation, you know, our situation is totally unique. I don't have any students like you. I really don't have any students like any other student. Everyone is very, very unique. And so I work with people where they're at for as long as whatever time I have left, I'm going to continue to do that. I work with everything where it's at. I'm just as shocked by things as everybody else is, how things are turning out. I never would have thought even 10 years ago I'd be sitting here. This was not a plan. More? Michael.
Can you say more about the difference between awareness and thinking?
Yes, awareness is the space in which thoughts occur. So it's awareness, and you can very simply put, and it's not exactly this simple, but it's makes it easier to understand conceptually, is we have an allegiance to the thinking because the thinking makes sense, because it actually has a past and a future, it has a construct, it has a logic, it has. Whereas the awareness itself is an open dimension of beingness, and thinking may be there and it may not be. And so you could say that everyone in here is like a thought, but the space that we're sitting in is like awareness. You can't have thinking without awareness. And so I think is that helpful to see that?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's a real intriguing idea, the difference that I'm still kind of struggling to understand.
So you can't understand this in the conventional way because that's just more thinking.
Right.
But what you can do, don't say right too quick.
Okay, no.
You follow? No. I like that. That's much better. We could have a shouting match. So what we need to see is to begin to, you can't actually see awareness, but you can see thinking. And what sees thinking is awareness. So awareness can't see awareness, but it can see thinking. So what seems to be necessary is just sit down and just observe what comes, observe what goes with the thinking process, so that eventually there's kind of a unspoken exchange of the allegiance to thinking, and the glue or the Velcro that we have to thinking, to our thinking process, begins to release, and we begin to our allegiance changes from the thinking processor to individual people or situations or concepts over to the room itself. And when that happens, lots of ways of saying it, but you're basically free. You're free to use concept, or you actually can use them or not. And you don't operate out of any kind of belief or disbelief, which is the most difficult part of belief to understand. Disbelieving is also belief. It's to believe that something is untrue. Michael.
Is it thinking that goes to war?
Well, the thinking is more of a part of the constructs and just a conceptual kind of situation. But the war mentality is coming out of a kind of a paranoia that trying to protect a self that is unreal, a self that is discontinuous. The discontinuity, once it starts to be seen, we start to get afraid that there's too much space. So we want to get out of the open field back into the broom closet. We want to shut down in some way. So the teaching person can actually help you just through interacting with them if you want to do that. If you want, you need to place yourself in front of that person, and you need to ask questions so that they have an idea who they're dealing with, because they're not necessarily going to be able to read your mind. Sir, Zach.
So thinking and awareness, they're inseparable. So to arrive at awareness, you need thinking. Is that?
Say that again.
To arrive at awareness, you need thinking. The two are inseparable.
So you can't arrive at what you are.
Okay.
You are awareness.
Right. Okay.
Don't say right too quick.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's called a conversation, and there needs to be a lot of space in there for what is being presented, for that to actually be understood on a level that drops below the radar of ego. Okay. When you come back too quick, what I'm seeing is your, and this isn't to accuse anybody of anything. We're all doing this. I'm doing it, so I know about it. We tend to, if we respond too quick, we're coming out of kind of a structure that we've created that is called a self, or me and my stuff, me and my territory. If you do it too quick, then that comes up so fast that there's no room for you to hear the next comment or response. Keep coming.
It's just that I feel like introspection.
Yes.
A degree of meditation involves introspection, but I also am of the opinion that introspection is kind of infinite.
Yeah, but this is Zach. This is speaking as somebody who's been doing this for a while. This is contemplation. So contemplation means you have an object. You're actually contemplating that, and that's valuable. Mm-hmm. But that contemplation works much better if it's coming out of a really powerful awareness. In other words, awareness that actually is more powerful than the thinking process. So there's plenty of room for the thoughts to come and go without grasping or rejecting, without believing or disbelieving, and without ignoring. So that's why sitting practice should be, when I say should be, maybe different for everybody, but I'm thinking for you particularly, just listening to you talk a little bit, I would say sit still as much as you can and unplug that food processor mind that you have.
Right. No, I'm really right.
That was a really right?
Yeah, that was really right.
I didn't see any capital R on it.
you analyze me pretty well.
I do?
I guess.
No, you're the one analyzing. I'm not analyzing.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I said that to my teacher once in 1975. I was sitting in front of Trump Rinpoche, and he said, well, after quite a long space there, he said, well, keep sitting. And I said, oh, you bet. He said, you bet? You bet? It was terrifying to have him do that. You're doing much better. Yes.
Questions from William Murray and Jim Service.
Yes.
William asks, when meditating, my gaze softens and I don't actually see anything but blur. Should I retain my focus, or is the softening fine?
It's fine. If it softens, it'll come and go. More sitting will change it. Eventually it'll sharpen right up, and then for a while it'll back off for a while. It'll do just what the self-centeredness does, and what reality does is discontinuous. Nothing lasts for any length of time. Everything is fading out and coming back into focus. It's called impermanence.
And then 2 questions from Jim Service out in
Yes,
Arizona.
Jim, long time no hear from.
His first question is what's in us that wants to be free ego? And the second question is, if so, how can we not have our practice constantly sabotaged by it when practice gets tough?
I think that's a good, and I think it's both. I mean, the ego is mixed up. Everything is discontinuous, so everything's all over the place, but we can't get any clarity out of it. So as far as being sabotaged, what you're telling me, Jim, when you say that, is you're aware that it's being sabotaged. That's the beginning of it. You have to be aware that you're doing this, and then you just continue on that in that same way without adding, subtracting, dividing. Don't meddle with it at all. Just operate out of awareness itself, insofar as you can. It sounds good. I'm not hearing anything difficult there, other than as long as you're sitting a lot, that would be good. Anyone else? Other questions here on teaching situation, or anything for that matter? Awareness. Gary.
Would you say it's valuable to have more than one teacher as you go through your path?
Let's put it this way. Whatever happens is probably going to be pretty choiceless if you're really devoted to this situation. If you having 2 teachers at the same time, I wouldn't recommend that. That could be, that doesn't work. We have to have a primary teacher. But that's how it looks to me. I don't know. Go do that. Write a book about it. I mean, maybe you could. I don't think so, because people are functioning. It's not a matter of right or wrong. They're functioning in a different way. Probably, if you look closely, if you happen to have 2 teachers, you'll find that one person is probably letting you off the hook a little bit more, and the other one is more or less pointing more directly at your misunderstanding or your self-deception. And that doesn't mean that the person who's pointing at that isn't easygoing or kind or whatever. It doesn't mean that the person it doesn't mean anything about anything extra, any kind of extra judgment. But you'll know, and you may not be ready for that kind of criticism. And that kind of criticism doesn't always show up as, this is what you're doing wrong. It could show up as they're mirroring back to you your own self-centeredness. It just looks like they're doing it. So you think they're wrong or bad. Happens all the time over here. When I say all the time, a few times a week. So what do you think? How does that look to you? What would you say about having 2 teachers?
I think it would be good to get that kind of contrast, maybe.
Contrast doesn't work. The only contrast that's going to work is the contrast you see in your mind with your awareness. That contrast, because you won't have that kind of. What you'll do is you'll evaluate. You'll play one against the other. Ego is very, very shrewd, and it is notorious for being not only without end, but you can't defeat ego. You can't explode. You can't get rid of it. It's not real, but it sure thinks it is. And it will do anything, any kind of shenanigans to be there and say, well, I have to be here. If you're going to attain enlightenment, I have to witness it. Your ego can, the death of ego, or the seeing that there isn't any such thing, which is like a funeral, is awakening. And so therefore, I had one teacher, and then he passed away in 1987. And I thought, well, I'm done with that. I know all I have to do is practice what he said. And then Coben came along 3 years later. And I really, for years, denied that he was my teacher. And I wouldn't look at it. And I wouldn't acknowledge that in my own mind. I kept thinking, no, I don't need another teacher. I had a teacher. I had a great Mahasiddha, the Dorji Drawdle of Mukpo. Who's this little guy? Hasn't even written a book. But he was a powerful teacher, and those who knew him will say that. And he didn't have a lot of students. He wouldn't let anybody publish any of his talks, probably because he didn't think they were very good, if I know him. But he, without him, I would not be sitting here. Without both of them, so I needed both of those. But that's just for me. You may need one. You may need 5 teachers. And then there's lots of other. To go into, since we're talking about teachers, His Holiness Karmapa was a teacher. His Holiness the 16th, whom I had met and received Karmapakshi Abhisheka from. And then Trungpa Rinpoche's Dharma heir, Avaja Regent Ursula Tenzin was a teacher of mine. So it might have lots of other teachers that might come in, but you'll have one primary teacher, and that one you won't have any doubts that that's your teacher. You might listen to other people, so you could still do that.
I don't feel the need for that.
Okay. Since
What makes a teacher a teacher?
they're really smart. I would say that on a spiritual mentor, or Kalyana Mitra is the Sanskrit word for, which translates as friend in the virtue. So of course, the virtue is transcending this world and transcending the selfish, aggressive, self-centered ego, which is unreal, transcending that, or seeing that it's unreal, and the person that can help you with that. So if the person is helping you with that, that may not be comfortable. But if you're really sincere and you really want to do this, which I'm not here to sell this to anybody, I would say don't do it. Wait till your next life. Wait till you're born in a place, if there is such a place, with another teacher teaching. Don't do it unless you have to. So it's not for sale. More?
I have to imagine the relationship between teacher and student is mutual to a degree. Like you learn from us as much as we learn.
Oh no, I'm all through you learning.
Okay. But I mean, you must get something out of your teaching.
I'm not, so there's a separation, obviously. You guys are over there. And, wait.
Okay, so
Don't say, yeah, of course. That means you're not listening to me. Ready? Again, when I saw that coming. So yes, there is a mutuality that happens, but it's very soft in the sense of working and seeing where someone's at and seeing if someone's ready to understand some particular thing. It's not that you have this esoteric bank vault full of secret teachings or something, but it's just about just being with the person. It's very simple. Trungpa Rinpoche talked about it this way: the teacher introduces you to your world. You've been missing it. You're covering it up with objections, opinions, ideas, concepts. We're just full of them. We're just full of that stuff. And the teacher shows you that it's just this. That one of the ways of putting this is, that I put this, is what you are looking for, you are looking at. But what I'm saying is you're covering up what you're looking for with your preconceptions, your ideas, your hopes, your fears. And the teaching person will help you by talking to them if you ask them questions. You've got to ask questions. And they have to be questions where you ask the question and you listen to the answer and you contemplate that answer, because that teacher hears that response at the same time you do. They don't even know they have that answer because they're doing it out of a mutuality. It's called dependent origination, and it penetrates all the way to the center of the earth. It just looks like they're different people here. There's only one thing happening. What is that?
Find out. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Is awareness a form of awakening?
So awareness is a concept that points to the spaciousness of the mind that doesn't have, like it says in the Heart Sutra, without walls of the mind. Doesn't have any border. It can go through anything. It's fearless. It doesn't have, there's no self that's being protected. So when that is functioning, then I think that's a way of talking about awakening to no separation. Just seeing there are things are separated, like I always use the fingers, or things are separated, but fundamentally it's a hand. It's one thing, not separate. So sometimes it's necessary to see how separate things are in order to eventually see that there's fundamentally no separation. Yes.
Question from Yokodo in Minneapolis, and then one from Anna Maria out in New York.
Okay.
So Gyokudo first, how do you see when awareness is taking precedence over thinking?
You can't. If you can see that, that's more thinking. More?
Not yet.
Anna
Maria.
Anna Maria.
And it's multifaceted. Her question.
That's a question?
No.
Well, it's a multifaceted question.
Yes.
She's
I'll read the whole thing.
working with jewels.
She asked, is the teacher functioning as a reflection of you any different from others and situations that are also a reflection of you, your projections, your neurosis?
What the reason you have the teacher is to show you that everything is the guru. You need to have a specific teacher so that he or she can show you that everything that happens to you is teaching you. It has been said this way: if you're always a student, you don't really need a teacher because you're always a student. But it can't be just your ego saying, well, everything is my teacher. As soon as you grasp onto that as an idea, we're right back to the self-centeredness, trying to keep away from having a teacher. We don't want to do that. It's too dangerous. It's better if I interpret things as, well, this is a teaching. One of the ways you can notice that you might be fooling yourself is you might have feelings or thoughts or opinions, and you'll blame people for them, or you'll blame yourself. Blame this way or blame that way is delusion. There isn't anyone to blame. I sometimes say you don't have to forgive anybody if you just retrieve all the blame you've been sending out. If you're blaming somebody, you're going to have to forgive them. But then that just perpetuates the duality, the forgiveness. I'm not here to argue with anybody about it. So if you need to forgive, you'll know it. You can just forgive people, or they can forgive you. But if you don't blame anybody, if you see that there is no solid person anywhere who's to blame for everything, or any one thing, it's always dependently arisen. The most evil person in the world, which we can all name a few, is dependent. They got to that position because of all of the other circumstances that were there that created that kind of a dynamic of fear. And so to go to war with that by blaming or doing anything or fighting with them, which is a form of blame, better to negotiate. Yes.
You ready for the rest of her question?
This is facet number 27.
Yes. She asks, can wisdom / in caps, what is, be reflected back? Is the reflecting itself ego, or what is reflection?
If you think it's a reflection, then this is ego. If you see that what is being reflected back at you is you, then this is transcendence. This is wisdom. Wisdom only sees wisdom. Wisdom can't see anything else. If it sees something else, then we're right back to separation. And it might be a low frequency of self-centeredness, but it's still self-centeredness. Zach,
how do you utilize, say, mindfulness or something to apply to protest? Or something that I know historically Gandhi or MLK, and I
can respond to that.
You are fighting against something that
I can respond to that.
Okay.
So this is the way I would do that, and I've done this before. I would say, don't work on yourself. because if you start to work on the world, what happens is you're projecting your own negativity out on the world, and you're trying to fix yourself by fixing the world. Just a way of talking about it. So I say, just work on this. Become very clear about this situation, about who you are. Become clear about that, or as clear as you can. And then don't do anything unless you have to. And if suddenly you see something arise where I have to go march somewhere and hold signs that say, stop fracking or something like that, I would say do that. If you feel like you need to do that, but if you feel like you have to do that, then you probably do. So we're not separate. So, but if you do it out of some kind of decision-making thing, or should I, shouldn't I? If you're doing that, don't do anything. If you're going back and forth about anything, what that means is you don't have enough information. You need to wait.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sheldon.
I heard it said in the past that having two teachers allows the student to pick and choose. So if you go to one teacher and ask a question and you don't like the answer from one teacher, you go to the second teacher and ask the question.
Yeah, unless they're talking behind your back.
To get a better answer. Can you talk about that?
I can. I'm just saying that's why sequentially I'd say you might have several teachers. I don't know. Only you would know that. And I'm not saying fundamentally you can't have two teachers. I don't know. It could show up all kinds of ways. Things are not just because I say so doesn't mean that has to be that way. So I'm just saying this is how it looks. Looks like it would be better to just have one and then work with that one. And then if somehow that doesn't work out, or I would say if you really, what I've said before, and I say to people who ask me to be their teacher, which a few people do, function as a personal teacher, I say, I'm saying now because I didn't in the past, and now I'm saying it. If you want to be a student of mine, then you have to agree to, if you want to leave, you have to come and ask permission. And this puts you on the spot, because then I say, okay, and then, I'm put on, I don't know if I want to do this. I have to ask permission to go to another teacher. It's a real good idea to do that. And that way you've got something invested in a situation, because there's no payoff, there's no fee, or at least not in this situation. And so this way, if you got to the point where you wanted to go to someone else, you would come and talk and say, I want to go study under this other person. I would always give you permission. It would be but the exchange there seems to be very important to formally break off your connection with the teacher. He or she would always let you go if I always would anyway. And I think either one of my teachers would have let you go. But it's very good practice to do that. And that makes it clear. That way I'm not sitting around thinking about you, wondering how you're doing or something. I can be clear of that. I can just let you go and put more energy into people who want to study here. So is that helpful? Is there more you want to talk about that? Yeah, you're welcome.
Is there a difference between having two teachers and, say, having a teacher and then going to hear other people talk?
Well, I think you should always go and hear other people talk. Sure, listen to everybody. When I say that, of course, and if people are talking, you're not restricted to. There are some teachers that do that, though. I had a person who was kind of doing that with me for a while, and we had a good connection. And her teacher stopped her from listening to me, even though I was fine with her having a primary teacher and just checking in with me. I felt like I could help her a little bit. I didn't interfere with her relationship to her teacher at all. But I think she was getting maybe too magnetized and was too interested in what I was doing. So, and she was very devoted to this fellow. And she went, I haven't heard from her since. She sent me one email and said, I'm not gonna mention names, so-and-so doesn't want me to study with you anymore. And I didn't even respond because she didn't ask permission. So I just stopped. As soon as she said that, I never emailed, I haven't been in touch, and I wonder how she's doing. But she did okay. At least she told me. I've had people leave and never even say anything. I've had other people say, I can no longer function as your student. Just tell me that with no discussion. I mean, I know, relatively speaking, I know what happened there, but I would have liked to at least discussed it with them, but didn't do it. So it just makes it difficult when you feel like you've done your very best you give your life to it. Anybody who does this is not doing it to get rich. Well, I can think of a couple of people. But you have to have, it becomes a kind of a materialistic orientation. You start doing it that way. So, well, okay. Yes.
Isn't, if you do have opportunity for two teachers and you shop one against the other, isn't that ego that's at work?
Well, probably. That's why I'm saying you just have one. You could have, I have several people who think of me as their teacher. I can't remember whether they've asked me or not or whatever, but function that way without actually asking me. They function like that. But they also have a therapist and other people. I think it's confusing to do that because therapy is about getting better, feeling better, getting rid of the neurosis, stopping. Meditation practice is about seeing through the whole thing. So it's a spiritual path. Therapy is, albeit very valuable. I'm not saying a person shouldn't even do that. Some people might be better off to do therapy with a really good therapist. There's lots of ways of looking at this. As you know, we've talked about this a lot. Just like what we've been doing is to go in and investigate someone's consciousness. Sometimes called hypnotherapy, but to go in and look deeply in someone's consciousness and try to see what's happening just below the surface there, which is difficult for people to see on their own. More?
Well, I'm just thinking about the statement you've made about, or I think it was Rinpoche who said that the job of a teacher is to insult you.
Yes, that's in Myth of Freedom.
And so how do you know if it's an insult or something that's helping?
How do I know? Or
As a student, how would the student know that?
Well, probably because it feels like an insult.
Can an insult be helpful?
If you don't leave, if you stay there, I mean, if you use that as a reason to leave, and this person is someone you've asked to be your teacher, and then you leave, then you didn't really trust that teacher in the first place, or you didn't really give them the benefit of the doubt in the first place. I'm not saying, and you could take it the other way and say, what if the teacher molests me, or I hear rumors that he or she is doing this or this or this, or taking, bribes. I don't know what it would be from, but doing something illegal in some way, or there's a lot of bad press out there, then, I would say, go and talk to the teacher about it. Have some interchange about it. Quite often, these people who have really bad press out there, there's lots of them. They're probably all over the place, but they need to go and talk to the person about it and get them to come out in public and talk about that, rather than just shut down on it and start to strengthen the rules, which is what some organizations have done. Make it so you can't be in an interview room with somebody alone. Ridiculous. You can't trust to sit down in a room with someone. Why are you even there in the first place?
Thank you.
Welcome. Shoka.
If you function as a student, but you haven't asked that teacher to be your teacher, are you functioning as a student?
Not completely, but the teacher's going to meet you where you're at. So you help people where they're at. Some people are not ready to make that kind of commitment, just like some people are not ready to sell rock suits. Some people don't want to be monks, and they shouldn't be. You shouldn't do anything unless you have to do it. This is like glue, to glue yourself to the teachings and to the teaching person if you have one. So, but then other people there's people that have never even mentioned precepts, and I don't bring it up if they don't. So I'm not here to say, well, you should take precepts. Well, you should be a monk. Or you should be like me. You should do this. I don't do that. I wait, and quite often, people that want this have to ask. I don't know, how many times did you ask?
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
I would say so.
Yeah, before I said okay. So I want to make sure you really want to do this, because I've had people start that I didn't do that with, and then for some reason, whatever, other kinds of reasons, they would stop. That's not good. That's not good for their practice. It's not good to start a practice to ask for something and then stop it. You should follow through and finish. Yes.
How come you've asked if I want to stop?
Because of your changing relationship situation. The changing with relationship, you're engaged now, you weren't before, now you are, and I can see you need to spend time. And I don't know, I'm not here to tell you how much. So I've said if you're sewing a robe to be a monk, all I've said since you bring it up, I feel like I can talk about it. I've said maybe put it on a shelf for a year. Haven't I said that? No, I'm not saying you stop, just set it up for a year and do something else. Come back later. And so you've made it very clear, at least the last time we talked, that you didn't want to do that. You wanted to continue. And I said, okay, then come up with a schedule that's going to be workable, that where it puts you into this situation strong enough where you're practicing a lot. And right now, the schedule you gave me is about 22 hours of sitting meditation every week. That's pretty strong for someone who has a fiance who's sitting right there, and someone who has that and also has a job and has to make a living to function and so on. More?
A different question.
Yes.
What happens when you ask the teacher to function as a teacher?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean.
In the context of the difference between somebody functioning as a
just kind of talking to me a lot and asking me a lot of questions. Well, if it's a formal request like that, then I these days anyway, in the last couple of years, I've said, okay, but you have to ask permission. I want you to understand you have to ask permission to leave. And it's not because I won't give them permission. I want to make sure they know that if they decide to stop, that it's not just a casual thing. I put a lot of effort and time into working with someone. I never refuse to talk to anybody for whatever length of time. I don't time interviews. Sometimes they go on for an hour or two. And sometimes they end in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't stop them. So did that answer your question or not?
I don't know.
I didn't know either. That's why I asked you. I forgot what your question was. Of course, I forget a lot of them. Anything else? Or are we done? Okay, very good. Well, we can dedicate the merits, and then we'll see you some other day. Sorry.
In the back of your chant books, your morning service books, is the dedication. And we do have our donation boxes out in the hallways, so feel free to fill them up.
Good idea.
May there this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho San Shi Shifu Shi Son Mu Sa Moko Sa Moko Jaorumi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Parita,